I told my mom in a panic, expressing that the guy would not leave. My mom told me to stay put in their room and keep the bedroom door locked. She said they were calling the police. My mom kept me on the line with her on her phone while they called the police using my dad's phone. They had to leave the restaurant they were in to go outside to better be able to communicate. It was a summer night. The windows were all cracked open to let some air into the house. And through my parents' window, I heard the gate on one side of the house leading to the backyard opening. It opened in a very discreet, gentle-sounding way. I told this to my mom, and she kept telling me to just stay quiet, stay in their room, and keep the lights off. I said quietly into the phone, "What if he tries getting in through the den window?" My mom would tell me to just stop talking and wait for the police. She would continue talking into the phone, feeding me updates from the police and their ETA, reminding me also to not talk. I was starting to calm down just a bit when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps downstairs. Footsteps of someone inside the house, wandering around. I whispered this in a panic to my mom, and I heard her scream something into the other phone to the police. Probably something along the lines of, "The man is inside the house, hurry up." My mom told me to hide under the bed and wait there. For my 12-year-old self, it was the most horrific, unreal moment of my life. The only thing keeping me feeling relatively protected was the tiny little lock on my parents' bedroom door. I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. The stairs are by my sister and I's bedroom down the hall. My parents' bedroom is further down. The footsteps faded for a few moments, I'm assuming as the intruder went into our bedrooms, searching. My mom told me the police would force their way in and to not move until they were inside. I heard the footsteps coming down this way until they got to the bedroom door, and then they tried pressing down the doorknob only to find it locked. They tried a few times, as if that would somehow magically unlock the door. Then there was a light knocking on the door, but the person on the other side didn't speak a word. They tried the doorknob one more time before I heard the footsteps walk back down the hallway, then down the stairs, and they faded away deeper into the house. I did my best not to burst out into tears the entire time. I didn't even whisper anything into the phone because I was too scared to make the slightest sound. My mom finally told me the police were there, but to still stay put. I was expecting to hear them kick down the door, but instead, I just rather suddenly heard multiple heavy footsteps and a man shouting my name, identifying himself as a police officer. I heard them coming up the stairs. My mom gave me permission to answer them and unlock the door. There were two officers upstairs when I opened the door, and then two more downstairs. They didn't have to kick down the front door because the back door was left completely ajar. The back sliding window was also slid completely open, which was the obvious original entry point. I had to talk with the police and tell them everything that happened, including my suspicion of the pizza guy, with my parents listening in on the phone. They were en route home. By the time they got back, there were only two police officers still at the house. With the police report including a note of the pizza guy, they said they'd do their investigation. My parents brought me to Gianni's Pizzeria the next night and asked me to point the guy out if I saw him. When I didn't see him, they asked the manager which employee matched the description of the delivery guy I described. He said that would be Phil, who was currently out doing a delivery. After explaining the whole scenario, he said there's no way that would be Phil and asked us to leave the premises. Long story short, my parents made a big scene in the pizzeria, and they said they would never give them our business again. We went to the car and waited in the parking lot. We waited for almost an hour, and when he never showed up, we left. My parents thought it was because the manager called or texted the employee, which caused him not to show back up, but who knows. My parents contacted a few lawyers who ultimately didn't take the case due to a lack of solid evidence, stating it would be a waste of time, basically. Ultimately, we never did go back to that pizzeria, and it wasn't for a long while after that that my parents felt safe leaving me home alone again, simply because of this incident. Ultimately, I do think it was the pizza guy, or at least someone associated with him, because who else would have known that I was home alone that night?
So he must have been there to say sleep. We have to leave early morning tomorrow. We all stopped laughing and pretended as if we were sleeping. So in the meantime, someone
When I
knocked
was
on
a
the door
teenager,
again, and when
my
he
parents
opened
and I
the door,
moved
there
from
was no one, there was
California
not
to
a
a
single
secluded
person,
area
and
in
it was
North
a pin drop
Idaho.
silence.
My parents had
We
just
all were so
retired and built their
freaking
dream
scared.
home deep in the backcountry.
So after that incident,
We had
we
no
all
neighbors in
slept, and I don't know
sight, just
why,
forest.
but while sleeping I felt
Endless,
like someone was
dense
singing
forest
beside
that
me in
backed
some
right up to
unknown
national
language.
parklands and paper mill
I
logging
shared
grounds.
this with my sister, and she told
The
me
house
that
was
she heard the
massive.
same kind
2
of thing when I
stories, a
informed our
gym,
family
a
once
full
said a
bar and
single
pool
thing
room,
later on
and
when
a
we were
legit
back
movie
home,
theater
and
set
my
up in the
uncle
basement.
informed me that the room we
It
were
felt
in
like
was
the kind of
room
house
the German
people dream
family had
of.
died.
Remote, quiet, perfect. Or so it seemed. I was dating my high school girlfriend at the time. One night, while my parents were out on a date downtown, I invited her over to hang out and watch a movie. We were completely alone. I cracked open a beer. I was underage, but figured no one would care, and we headed down to the movie room to watch Gladiator. Everything started out normal, but somewhere around the midpoint of the movie, maybe close to midnight,
experience.
something switched in me.
This story is from the
Out
year
of nowhere,
2015
I was
when I was
overwhelmed
9.
with this fight or flight feeling.
My entire family was on a
It was
vacation
like my
trip
body
to Pori.
sensed something my brain couldn't
We stayed
see.
in a hotel, which is
My
one
heart
of our
was
family
pounding,
members.
and I kept glancing at the
We were on a
uncovered windows
vacation, we all
behind
were
us that
playing
looked out
games
into
like
the pitch
Truth
black
and Dare,
woods.
so my elder cousins
I didn't
were
want to freak out
teasing
my
me.
girlfriend,
Look out
so I
from the
kept it to
balcony, you will
myself.
find someone
In
standing in a
fact,
white
things
sari.
got a little heated
And I was
between us
like,
during the
this
movie.
is all rubbish.
But
Deep
the whole
down, I
time,
was scared
I
as
couldn't
hell.
shake the feeling that we were
As
being
the hotel
watched.
belonged to our uncle,
I didn't
an
know
elder
from
cousin
where,
started
but
telling
I knew.
stories at 3 a.m.
After the
that
movie
in one of
ended,
the rooms,
I walked
a
her
German
upstairs and
family
out to her
died by
car.
suicide.
The house was
We
dead
all laughed
quiet
in
again.
response because
She
who will
drove
come back
off,
from
and I
Germany
turned to go
and
back inside.
attempt
When I remembered,
suicide
I
here.
left the
So
bar,
he was like,
pool
it's up
room,
to you
and
whether
movie
you will
room
agree
lights
with me
on.
or not.
So I went back
This
downstairs.
conversation kept on going, and between
I turned
us,
off the lights in the
someone
movie
knocked
room
at our
first,
door.
then paused.
At first,
My eyes
we thought it
drifted
might
to
be
the
one of
large
our
window
uncles
that looked
because
into
we
the
all were
backyard,
awake, so he must
and
have
that's when I saw him.
been there to say sleep.
Man,
we have to leave
He
early
looks
morning tomorrow.
homeless. Wild
We all
hair,
stopped
filthy clothes,
laughing
but
and
what
pretended
froze me in
as if we were
place was his
sleeping.
expression.
So in the
He had the
meantime,
biggest, creepiest smile I've ever seen, with wide, staring
someone
eyes
knocked
that
on the
looked
door
absolutely
again, and when he opened the
deranged.
door, there was no one.
And
There
in
was
his
not a
hand
single
was a knife.
person, and it was a pin drop
He was
silence.
gently tapping it on the glass,
We all
over
were
and
so
over.
freaking scared.
At first, I thought I was
So after that
hallucinating.
incident, we all
I
slept,
slowly
and I don't
backed
know why,
away and
but
went
while
to the bar
sleeping,
room
I
to
felt
shut
like
off the
someone
rest of
was
the
singing
lights.
beside me in some unknown
That
language.
room has a sliding glass door
I
that
shared
also
this with
faces
my
the
sister,
woods.
and she told me that she
I
heard
flipped
the
the
same kind of
switch
thing
and
when I
watched in
informed our
horror
family
as the
once
man
said a
calmly
single
walked
thing
from the
later
window
on when
to
we
the
were back
door,
home.
still
And my uncle
smiling,
informed
still
me that the
staring.
room we were in was the room the
At
German
this
family
point,
had
we
died.
were less than a foot apart, just the glass between us. He didn't try to get in. He didn't move at all. He just watched me. I went upstairs without a word. Right then, my parents were walking through the door. I told them I think I need to go to the psych ward or something.
My paranormal
I swear, I just saw a
experience.
guy with a knife watching me outside.
This story is from the year
My mom went pale.
2015 when I was
My dad's
9.
eyes narrowed, and
My
without a
entire
word,
family was
he went
on
to
a
the gun
vacation
safe,
trip to Pori.
grabbed his rifle, and
We
stormed
stayed
out
in a
to check the
hotel,
property.
which is one of our family members.
I asked my mom what was going
We
on.
were on a
and
vacation.
she said,
we all were
there
playing
have been a
games
few
like
break-ins
Truth
in
and
the
Dare,
area.
so my
A
elder
guy
cousins
wandering
were
through the
teasing
woods
me.
trying to
Look
get
out
into
from the
homes.
balcony, you will
The
find
description
someone
you
standing in a
gave
white
matches
sari.
exactly.
And I was like, this is all
The police
rubbish.
were called,
Deep down, I
but
was
they didn't
scared
find
as hell.
anything. No
As
signs
the
of
hotel
entry,
belonged
no
to our uncle,
footprints,
an elder
just
cousin
cold
started
black
telling
woods.
stories at 3 a.m.
That should have
in one
been the end of
rooms,
it,
a
but it
German
wasn't.
family died by suicide.
That night, as I tried
We
to
all
sleep,
laughed in
I
response
could hear a light
because
tapping
who will
sound
come back
beneath
from
me.
Germany
My bedroom was on the
and
second
attempt
floor,
suicide here.
directly above
so
the
he was
movie
like,
room.
it's up to you whether you
It
will
sounded
agree
like
with me or
metal
not.
gently tapping glass.
This conversation kept
tried to
on going,
convince
and between
myself it
this,
was nothing.
someone knocked at our door.
The tapping lasted for
At
hours.
first, we thought
This
it might be
happened
one of
night
our
after
uncles
night
because
for
we all were
weeks.
awake, so he must have been
Sometimes
there
it
to
would
say
stop.
sleep. We have to
Sometimes
leave
I'd
early
wake up
morning
at
tomorrow.
3 a.m. and hear it faintly again.
We all
I
stopped
even thought I
laughing
heard
and
footsteps
pretended
on the
as if
roof
we were
one night.
sleeping.
I
So
checked
in
the windows,
meantime,
but I never saw
someone
anyone.
knocked on the door again,
Still,
and when he
I
opened
couldn't
the
shake
door,
the
there was
feeling
no
that I
one,
was
there
being
was not
stalked,
a single person, and it was a
watched.
pin drop silence.
Then winter came.
We all
My
were
parents
so
had to go out of
freaking
town
scared.
for a few days, but they were still
So
nervous
after
about
that
what had
incident,
happened.
we all slept, and I
Before
don't
they
know
left,
why, but
they
while
gave me a
sleeping, I
shotgun
felt like
just in
someone was
case.
singing beside me in
We
some
also had a
unknown
big
language.
Rottweiler, sweetest dog you'd ever
shared this
meet
with my
and totally
sister, and she
silent,
told me that
unless
she heard the
something was
same
really
kind of
there.
thing when I informed our family once.
One
at a
night while I
single
was
thing
home
later
alone,
on when we were
I heard
back
slow,
home, and my
crunching
uncle
footsteps in
informed
the
me that
snow
the room we were
outside,
in was the room the German
heavy
family
and
had died.
deliberate. The dog stood up, ears perked, and began growling low and deep at the front door. Then barking, ferocious, loud, and non-stop. He only ever did that when he saw something real. I stayed silent. I didn't want whoever was out there to know I was home. I didn't move. Then came the knock. Slow, hollow, and taunting. I didn't answer. I slept with the shotgun next to me that night. Door locked, blinds drawn, dog at my feet. The next morning, I went outside and saw something that made my stomach drop. Footprints. Fresh human footprints circled the entire house. They stopped at every single window, like someone was trying to look in, searching for me. I followed the prints around the property, and they eventually led into the forest. I followed them maybe half a mile before they started to zigzag, veer off, loop back, like whoever made them was trying to throw me off their trail. I turned back. Something told me it was a bad idea to keep going. That night, the tapping came back, louder this time. I knew it was him. I unlocked my door, grabbed my shotgun, and stepped onto the second-story deck. I flipped on the fog lights that illuminated the backyard. There he was. Same man, same smile, and same dead eyes. He was holding the knife again, staring directly at me like he could see through me. I raised the shotgun and shouted, "If you don't leave, I'll put one right through you." He didn't move or flinch, just stared unblinking, grinning. I fired a warning shot at him. That finally got a reaction. He staggered a bit, then slowly backed into the woods, still facing me.
It carried a thick smell of
That's when I decided to unleash the dog.
David walked down the dark
I sprinted downstairs, threw open the sliding door, and let him loose.
The yellow beam hit wet stone walls covered
He
in
bolted into the forest
scratches.
like a black missile, barking and snarling.
And saw a small
I've never
dirt
seen him that aggressive.
In the middle of the
He had a
room
shock
sat a
collar,
wooden
so he
chair.
couldn't go far, but I like to think he chased that guy off for good, because after that night, I never saw him again.
Long, tattered robes trailed across the damp floor. David stopped and called out to the figure. It did not move or make a single sound. He took 2 steps
This happened
closer
in March
and
of
shined the light toward it.
2022, during spring
The
break.
figure turned its head all
I
the
was
way
in my
around
second
over
year
its
of
shoulder.
college.
The
My
face
friends
had
and
no
I,
eyes,
6 of us
only
total,
smooth
decided to
skin
rent a
stretched
cabin
tight
out in
across
South
bone.
Carolina for a few days,
A wide smile
just to get
cut
away
across
from
the pale
everything.
face from ear to
No
ear.
school,
David
no
tried
stress,
to scream,
no phones.
but his breath stopped in
It
his
was
throat.
supposed to be one of those quiet
His legs
trips where you
turned to
drink
ice
too
and
much,
would not move
play
an
music
inch.
too loud, and maybe
The
make some
creature on
memories
the
you'll
chair
laugh about
stood up with a
later.
loud snap of bones.
There were 4 of us guys,
It
me,
moved toward
Matt,
him with a
Chris, and
strange,
Tyler,
broken
and 2
spiral
girls,
walk.
Jess and Sarah.
Its long
We'd all been
fingers
close
scraped
since
hard
freshman
against
year.
the wet stone floor.
The cabin
David
we
spun
picked was
around and
stupid
ran
cheap
hard
for
the
its
wooden
size.
stairs.
2 stories, a
He tripped on the
wraparound
bottom
porch,
step
2
and dropped his
bathrooms,
small
and listed as
flashlight.
being on private land
Total
near a
darkness
lake.
fell over the
It
basement
was
like
way
a heavy
out
wet
there,
blanket.
no towns for miles,
He felt
surrounded by
ice-cold fingers
forest.
brush against
The
the
guy
back
who
of his
owned it
neck.
had a thick accent and
He
seemed kind of
scrambled up the
off when we
stone
talked to
steps
him
in
on the
total
phone.
panic that he
All
slammed
he
the
said
heavy iron door
was,
shut
just don't
and
go
turned the
wandering
key.
too deep into the woods.
He fell back
Some old
onto the
stuff
kitchen
back
floor
there.
and gasped
Wells,
for air.
busted fences,
The house was
snakes.
quiet and
You don't want to
still
get turned
once again.
around.
He
We
thought he
laughed
was
about
safe
it,
from
though
whatever
he was just
lived
trying to
below.
add some spooky southern charm
Then he
to the
heard a
trip.
soft
But
knocking
when we
sound
got
coming
there,
from the
it
other
wasn't
side of
funny.
the basement door.
The
The
drive
knocking
took
stopped
forever.
and a dry voice spoke from the
GPS gave
keyhole.
out an hour before we
It
arrived.
whispered his name in a
The
high
last
and
part of the
happy
road
tone.
was just dirt and gravel,
David
barely
looked down
wide
at
enough for
high.
one car.
As
Trees got
some
thicker
hands
the
in the
closer
dim
we
light.
got.
His
When we
skin
finally
was
saw the
turning gray
cabin,
and
we
stretching
all kind
tight
of went
over
quiet.
his fingers.
It didn't look like
He
the
felt
pictures.
long scratches
It was
forming
older
across
and
his own
dirtier.
face.
The
He
windows
was
were
not in the
dusty,
kitchen
and a few
anymore.
of the shutters were hanging
He
off
was
by the
sitting on the
hinges.
wooden chair in the dark.
There was this faint smell
Web
outside,
results.
like old garbage and wet wood. We brushed it off and made jokes, said it just added character. We unloaded, claimed rooms, and started drinking by 7 p.m. The first night was fun. We grilled outside, cranked music from a Bluetooth speaker, and played some card games. By 11, it got cold, so we moved inside. That's when I noticed how dark the woods were. I don't mean just nighttime dark. I mean complete blackness. The porch lights barely lit up more than a few feet, and the trees were so dense it felt like they were pressing in from all sides. No bugs, no wind, just total, heavy silence. We ended up crashing around 2 a.m. I had one of the rooms on the ground floor, right next to the kitchen. Small and just a bed and a window facing the woods. At around 4:15, I woke up. No reason, just wide awake like someone had poked me. I laid there for a second, heart beating fast. Then I heard it.
The old house on the hill had been empty for 50 years. Dust choked the air. Shadows crawled up the walls like spiders. Mark stepped inside the dark hall. He held a dim flashlight. Its light flickered and died. Total blackness wrapped around him. A cold breath touched his neck. A whisper hissed in his ear, "You are late." Mark froze in terror that he tried to run toward the front door. His feet felt stuck in deep mud. The floorboards groaned beneath unseen weight. A wet, shuffling sound came from behind him. Long, pale fingers brushed his shoulder. They smelled of wet earth and decay. Mark turned his head very slowly. Glowing white eyes stared from the dark. They had no pupils, only empty voids. A wide, jagged smile stretched across a rotting face. The thing whispered his mother's voice. It called his name with a soft, loving cry. Mark wanted to answer, but his throat locked up. More shadows detached themselves from the walls. They formed shapes of tall, twisted people. They reached out with sharp, black nails. Cold hands grabbed his arms and legs. They pulled him down toward the rotting floor. The wood opened up like a hungry mouth. Dust filled his eyes and nose. He sank into the cold, damp earth below. Above him, the heavy door slammed shut with a bang. The house gave a long, metallic sigh of relief. Silence returned to the dusty rooms. Another set of footsteps echoed on the porch. The front handle turned with a loud click. A new visitor stepped into the dark hall. The flashlight rolled across the floor, still warm. The shadows shifted back into their hiding spots. They waited patient and still in the dark. The locked hospital room. At 3:09 a.m., Ethan was working the night shift as a hospital security guard. Every corridor was empty. Every patient was asleep. As he walked past room 306, he heard someone knocking from inside. 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 He checked the patient list. Room 306 had been empty for 12 years. The room had been sealed after a fire. No one was allowed inside. The knocking came again. Then a woman's voice whispered through the door. "Please, they're still in here." Ethan called the head nurse. She arrived, looked at the door, and turned pale. "Don't answer," she whispered. "But someone needs help," Ethan replied. The nurse grabbed his arm. "There hasn't been anyone in that room since the fire." The lights flickered. The knocking became louder. This time, dozens of hands seemed to be striking the door at once. Bang! 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 Then, suddenly, silence. A soft voice spoke from the other side. "They've gone now." Before the nurse could stop him, Ethan unlocked the door. The room was spotless. No bed. No furniture. Just white walls. He stepped inside. The air was freezing. Behind him, the door slammed shut. The lights went out. In the darkness, dozens of people inhaled at the same time. A match flared. For a single second, the room was filled with burned patients standing shoulder to shoulder. Every one of them stared at Ethan. Every one of them smiled. The flame went out. The lights returned. The room was empty. The door opened by itself. The nurse was gone. The hallway was gone. Instead, there was another hospital corridor. Long. Silent. Every room door slowly opened together. Inside each room stood a patient. Motionless. Watching him. At the end of the corridor, a woman in a burned hospital gown whispered, "You're on our floor now." The next morning, security footage showed Ethan unlocking room 306. He walked inside. The door closed. It never opened again. When maintenance finally forced it open, the room was empty, except for a brand new patient chart lying on the floor. Name: Ethan Brooks. Status: admitted at 3:09 a.m. Discharge: never.
অটোমেটিক থ্রেড, নিখুঁত মাপ এবং দীর্ঘস্থায়ী আরএফএল জিআই ফিটিংস, 100% গ্যালভানাইজড আয়রন দিয়ে তৈরি।
The train that never arrived. At 3:15 a.m., Michael missed the last train home. The station was empty. No staff. No passengers. Only a flickering display that suddenly changed to Platform 7. Arrival, 3:16 a.m. Michael frowned. There was no Platform 7. His station only had 6. Then a new staircase appeared at the end of the platform. It led downward into darkness. A cold announcement echoed through the station. "Passengers for the final journey, please stand behind the yellow line." Curious, Michael descended the stairs. At the bottom was Platform 7. An old black train waited with its doors open. Every seat was occupied. No one spoke. Every passenger stared straight ahead. Michael stepped inside. The doors slammed shut. The train began to move. Outside the windows, there was no tunnel. Only endless darkness. After several minutes, the train stopped. The doors opened. No station. Only blackness. A woman entered. Her clothes were soaked. She sat beside Michael without looking at him. Then she whispered, "Don't let them know you're alive." Michael's heart raced. Slowly. Every passenger turned their heads toward him. At the exact same time. None of them blinked. The woman beside him smiled. "You breathed." The lights inside the train went out. For 1 second. When they came back on, every seat was empty. Except Michael's. And the seat directly in front of him. Someone was sitting there now. Facing away. Long black hair covered her face. A station announcement echoed through the carriage. "Next stop, yours." The train stopped. The doors opened. Michael saw his own apartment building outside. Relieved, he stepped off the train. The doors closed behind him. As the train pulled away, he looked through the window. Every passenger was back. Watching him. Smiling. The soaked woman slowly raised one hand and waved goodbye. The next morning, police found Michael standing outside his apartment. He was alive. But he never spoke again. Every night at 3:16 a.m., he walks to the nearest train station, waiting for Platform 7 to return. The breathing in the closet. At 3:27 a.m., Claire woke to the sound of breathing. Not her own. Not outside. Inside her closet. Slow. Deep. Steady. She stared at the closed closet door, telling herself it was the old house settling. Then the breathing stopped. For a moment, there was complete silence. A soft voice came from inside the closet. "Are you asleep?" Claire pulled the blanket over her head. She didn't answer. A minute later. Tap. Something gently tapped the inside of the closet door. Then again. Tap. Tap. She grabbed her phone and switched on the flashlight. The beam landed on the closet. The door was still closed. The breathing returned. Closer now. As if whatever was inside had moved right up against the door. Then she heard a whisper. "Don't open it." The voice hadn't come from the closet. It had come from beneath her bed. Before she could react, the closet handle began to turn. Very slowly. The door opened by itself. Just an inch. Darkness filled the gap. No clothes. No shelves. Only endless black. A pale hand reached out and gripped the edge of the door. Then another. A woman's face slowly appeared. Her eyes were completely black. Her smile was impossibly wide. She whispered, "I finally found the right room." The lights went out. Claire screamed. When electricity returned a few seconds later, the closet door was closed again. Everything looked normal. The next morning, police found Claire's bedroom empty. The only unusual thing was the closet. It was completely empty. There were no clothes. No shelves. No back wall. Just a deep darkness that seemed to go on forever. The officers sealed the room. But neighbors still report hearing breathing from inside that closet. Every night at 3:27 a.m. The last room. When Adam rented the old house, the landlord gave him one rule. Never open the white door at the end of the hallway. "There isn't a white door," Adam replied. The landlord stared at him. "There will be." For weeks, there wasn't. Then, one night at 3 a.m., Adam woke to the sound of a door creaking open. He stepped into the hallway. At the very end stood a white wooden door. Fresh paint. Silver handle. It had never been there before. The next morning, it was gone. Every night after that, it returned. Each night, it was closer to his bedroom. On the 7th night, he found it directly across from his bed. A faint light leaked from beneath it. Then came a knock. Not on the door. From inside it. 3 slow knocks. A woman's voice whispered, "Please, don't let me out." Adam stepped back. The voice began crying. "I opened it, and now it wears my face." Silence. Then another voice answered from behind the same door. This one sounded exactly like Adam. "Don't listen to her." His blood ran cold. The handle turned. Very slowly. The door opened just an inch. A single eye looked through the gap. It wasn't human. It was far too large. Completely black. Watching. Waiting. Adam slammed his bedroom door and locked it. He stayed awake until sunrise. Morning came. The white door was gone. Relieved, he packed his belongings and left forever. Months later, the house was rented again. The new tenant asked the landlord, "What's that white door at the end of the hallway?" The landlord looked confused. There isn't one. The tenant smiled nervously. There is now. And somewhere behind the freshly painted door, someone knocked 3 times. From the inside. The for sale sign had been bleached white by the harsh Maine sun, rotting in the overgrown grass of Blackwood Hollow. For Caleb, a city developer from Portland, the isolated 19th-century Victorian was a steal. The house was a quiet, rotting relic of the past, untouched by the modern world and devoid of cell service. He bought it instantly. He spent his first evening sanding the old, splintered floorboards in the foyer. The rhythmic scrape of the tool echoed through the empty house. Outside, the pine trees stood like jagged teeth against the twilight. As the sun dipped entirely below the horizon, the silence in the house became suffocating. Caleb stopped the sander, wiping sweat from his forehead. That was when he heard it scratch. Scratch.it was faint, coming from the floorboards directly beneath his feet. He frowned, assuming it was a field mouse. Then, the rhythmic scraping grew louder, shifting and morphing into the distinct, heavy sound of someone dragging their fingernails against the underside of the wood. Caleb knelt down, pressing his ear to the cold oak. The scratching abruptly stopped. A breathless, raspy whisper seeped through the cracks. Caleb. He stumbled backward, his heart hammering against his ribs. It was just an old house settling, he told himself, breathing heavily. He grabbed his flashlight and shone the beam around the dusty, shadowed corners of the room. As the beam swept across the hallway mirror, his blood ran cold. The reflection in the mirror showed the foyer exactly as it was. However, in the dark glass, he was not kneeling alone. A pale, elongated figure with hollow, ink-black eyes was crouched right behind him, its bony, gray hands pressed flat against his shoulders. Paralyzed with terror, Caleb stared into the mirror, unable to blink or scream. The creature's jaw unhinged, letting out a heavy, corrupted exhale against the back of his neck. "We gave you plenty of time to leave," the thing whispered in a chorus of raspy voices. As Caleb watched in absolute horror, the gray hands in the reflection dug their long, jagged nails into his shoulders, pulling him backward into the darkness of the mirror. He felt his physical body shatter as the glass absorbed him, leaving the grand foyer empty once more. The house settled back into a heavy, quiet stillness. In the morning, another bleached, "For sale" sign would be planted in the yard. Thick, unnatural fog blanketed the quiet suburb of Salem, Massachusetts, obscuring the historic colonial facades. Arthur stood on his wraparound porch, staring into the impenetrable gray mist. It had been creeping toward his property since midnight, carrying a damp, earthy scent that smelled like a decaying forest floor. He clutched his steaming coffee mug, telling himself it was just an unusual New England autumn weather pattern. But the temperature had dropped exactly 30 degrees in 10 minutes, and the local streetlights had flickered out one by one, leaving his block in absolute darkness. He took a sharp step back as a wet, heavy thud echoed from the roof directly above his head. Panic flared in his chest, so he quickly retreated inside, locking the heavy wooden front door and deadbolting the frame. The silence inside his home was deafening, save for the sudden, erratic ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer. Arthur turned around and froze. Standing at the far end of his living room was a figure draped entirely in ragged, colonial-era cloth. The intruder's face was obscured by an oversized plague doctor mask, its hollow black eyes fixed upon him. A guttural, agonizing screech pierced the air, violently shattering the glass windows throughout the first floor and sending shards of jagged ice across the hardwood. The entity didn't walk, it glided forward with unnatural swiftness, leaving muddy, blood-red footprints. Arthur bolted toward the staircase, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He sprinted up to the second-floor master bedroom and slammed the heavy oak door shut, barricading it with his dresser. Outside, the creature's slow, deliberate footsteps ascended the stairs, getting louder and more agonizingly rhythmic with every passing second. Arthur desperately dialed 911 on his cell phone, but the screen showed absolutely no signal, displaying a terrifying, static-filled screen instead of his standard carrier. A series of violent scratches echoed against the bedroom door, followed by a sinister, whispering voice calling his name. It wasn't the voice of a human, it was a demonic, mocking echo of his own deepest, darkest fears. Suddenly, the scratching ceased. An agonizing quiet reclaimed the hallway, leaving Arthur gasping in the suffocating darkness. The floorboards beneath him groaned loudly. Before he could react, cold, skeletal hands ripped through the hardwood beneath his feet, pulling him violently downward. He screamed as the abyss of his own basement swallowed him whole. The neon sign of the Last Chance Oasis buzzed with a dull, fatiguing drone. Route 6 stretched out on either side like a black ribbon dipped in ink, cutting through the jagged, tooth-like mountains of rural Nevada. Inside the cramped station, Caleb wiped down the counter for the fourth time that night. It was 3:14 a.m. The air conditioner rattled a dying rhythm, blowing tepid air that smelled of ozone and hot dust. Outside, the payphone, a relic from the last century that stubbornly remained bolted to a splintered wooden post, began to ring. Caleb froze. The phone company had disconnected the coin-operated lines 6 months ago. The desert winds often played tricks, whistling through the old metal hook, but this was a sharp, electronic trill. Ring. Ring. Annoyed by the intrusion into the heavy silence, Caleb stepped out through the automatic glass doors. The desert night was a physical weight, cold and biting. The wind had died, leaving a dead stillness. The payphone rang again as he walked over, his boots crunching on the loose gravel. He picked up the heavy, scarred receiver. Route 6 Oasis, he muttered. If this is a prank, the nearest town is 40 miles back. Silence hummed on the line. Then, a ragged breath scraped against the earpiece. Caleb, a voice whispered. It sounded thin, like dry paper sliding across concrete. Who is this? Caleb snapped, gripping the plastic tighter. You don't have much time, the voice said. It was trembling, choked with a terrible, wet sob. Listen to me. Don't go back inside. Don't look at the security monitor for aisle 3. Caleb scoffed, his skin prickling with sudden, uninvited goosebumps. Is this a joke? Who's on the radio? I can see the whole parking lot, man. No one is out here. I am you, the voice wept, sharper now, rising in panic. I hid in the supply closet. It came in through the vent over the soda machine. It doesn't have a face, Caleb. It wears your jacket. It knows your name. A cold sweat broke out on Caleb's forehead. He stared at the glowing sign of the gas station behind him. Through the large glass windows, the fluorescent lights of aisle 3, stocked with motor oil and cheap snacks, flickered once. Twice. You're crazy, Caleb whispered into the dead black mouthpiece, though his hand shook so violently the receiver clattered against the metal coin slot. Look at the window, Caleb, the voice hissed directly behind his ear, not coming from the phone anymore, but vibrating from the hot desert air right at his neck. Caleb turned, standing inside the glass doors of the station, under the buzzing white lights, was a man wearing Caleb's faded blue denim jacket. The figure raised a pale, skinless hand and pressed it against the inside of the glass. It had no eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, wet dome of pale flesh where a head should be, and the payphone in Caleb's hand clicked, the dial tone droning on forever into the dark. Mark pulled his dusty Dodge Ram into the desolate, Interstate 70 rest stop outside Green River, Utah. It was 2 a.m. A torrential flash flood warning glowed on his dashboard. The rain battered the windshield, blurring the endless, pitch-black desert. He needed caffeine, badly. Inside the 24-hour convenience store, the fluorescent lights hummed a high-pitched, agonizing buzz. The aisles were completely empty, except for a lone, motionless man standing by the stale coffee station. He was wearing a weathered, grease-stained denim jacket, staring unblinkingly at an empty, bubbling slushy machine. Hey man, register's open. Mark asked, stifling a yawn. The man didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just tilted his head a fraction to the left, letting out a heavy, unnerving breath. Mark grabbed his coffee, quickly placed a $5 bill on the counter, and walked out. The heavy glass door latched shut behind him, cutting off the store's buzzing lights. The wind howled through the desert darkness. When Mark reached his truck, he froze. A thin layer of greasy, white handprints smeared his driver's side window. Panic spiked his adrenaline. He threw his truck door open and jumped into the driver's seat, locking the doors with a deafening click. Through the rain-streaked windows, he scanned the empty parking lot. The convenience store lights flickered out completely, plunging the rest stop into total, suffocating blackness. Suddenly, a massive thud hit the truck bed. The vehicle violently lurched under the sudden weight. Something heavy was dragging itself across the truck's metal roof, scraping like rusted iron against the paint. Mark killed the headlights and pressed himself against the door, holding his breath. Scratch. Scratch. The sound inched slowly toward his sunroof. He stared up through the tinted glass, his heart hammering in his chest like a trapped bird. Two wide, unblinking eyes and a gaping, bloodless mouth pressed directly against the glass, peering down at him from T. Dark roof. The figure tapped its fingernails against the sunroof, a rhythmic, deliberate knock, knock. Knocked. A faint, distorted voice whispered through the sunroof, mimicking a radio broadcast. Your door is unlocked, it hissed. Mark threw the truck into reverse, the tires spinning wildly in the mud. As he flopped into a tight, gravel-spitting drift, a figure materialized in his high beams. Standing dead center in his path was the man from the store, his jaw unhinged and eyes completely black, holding a jagged spike of rusted rebar. Mark slammed the gas, but the wheels only spun and smoked. The engine roared, and the truck finally lurched forward, right into the dark abyss of the pouring desert rain. The voice on the baby monitor. At 3:13 a.m., Emma woke to her baby monitor. A soft lullaby was playing. She smiled. Her daughter had been asleep for hours. Then she realized. She had never bought a baby monitor. The device was sitting on her bedside table. White. Old. Covered in dust. Its tiny speaker crackled. A woman's voice whispered. "She's awake." Emma's blood ran cold. She didn't have a child. She lived alone. The monitor hissed again. Tiny footsteps echoed through the speaker. Then childish giggling. Followed by slow, heavy footsteps. Chasing them. The giggling stopped. A little girl whispered. "Don't let it find me." Emma grabbed the monitor and switched it off. The screen stayed on. A grainy black and white image appeared. It showed a small bedroom. A child hiding beneath a blanket. The bedroom looked strangely familiar. Emma looked around. Her heart stopped. The room on the screen was her bedroom. The camera wasn't showing the past. It was showing her room from the ceiling. Emma slowly looked up. There was no camera. The speaker crackled. The little girl whispered. "It's behind you." Emma refused to turn around. The monitor suddenly emitted a loud burst of static. Then the image changed. The child was gone. Someone else was standing behind Emma. A tall woman with long black hair covering her face. Standing so close that her hair rested on Emma's shoulder. The woman slowly raised one finger to her lips. "Don't scream," she whispered. Emma dropped the monitor and spun around. The room was empty. Shaking, she looked back at the floor. The monitor was gone. The next morning, police searched the apartment. They found nothing. Except a layer of fresh dust on Emma's bedside table. In the exact shape of an old baby monitor. The woman behind the curtain. At 3:12 a.m., Hannah woke to the sound of someone whispering her name. "Hannah." She opened her eyes. Her bedroom was empty. Except for the curtains. They were moving. Slowly. There was no wind. The window was closed. The curtain swayed again. Something was standing behind it. She could see the outline of a woman's head. Perfectly still. Hannah whispered. "Who's there?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, one long finger slowly pressed through the curtain. Then another. The fabric stretched around them as if hands were pushing from the other side. Suddenly, her phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Don't pull the curtain." Her heart pounded. She stared at the silhouette. It hadn't moved. Then another message arrived. "It wants you to think it's behind the curtain." Hannah's breathing stopped. If it wasn't behind the curtain, then where was it? A cold breath touched the back of her neck. She slowly raised her shaking phone. The front camera was open. On the screen, she saw herself sitting in bed. And directly behind her, a pale woman. Smiling. Her face only inches away. Hannah screamed and spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. She looked back at the curtain. The silhouette was gone. Relieved, she dropped the phone. Another message appeared. You looked away. The bedroom door slowly clicked shut. Then the curtain began to move again. This time, from the inside of the room. It was past midnight when Sarah pulled her sedan off a desolate stretch of Route 66 in New Mexico. The gas gauge in her Toyota was flashing empty, and the glowing neon sign of a remote 24-hour convenience store offered the only civilization for miles. She walked inside, shivering from the biting autumn wind. The store smelled of stale coffee and burnt oil. A flickering fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The clerk behind the counter, a man with a blank, unblinking stare, didn't even look up as she grabbed a bottle of water and some snacks. Rough night to be driving, Sarah offered, setting her items on the counter. The man remained dead silent, slowly sliding her items across the scanner. Outside, through the large glass window, she noticed her car headlights were still on, slicing through the pitch-black parking lot. Just as the register beeped, the overhead lights violently clicked off, plunging the entire store into absolute darkness. Sarah froze, her heart pounding against her ribs. In the heavy silence, a wet, gravelly whisper echoed directly from the shadows just behind her. They've already drained the tank, it rasped. Sarah turned, the beam of her phone flashlight illuminating the aisle. The clerk was gone. The space behind the counter was entirely empty, leaving only his apron draped over the register. Panic seized her as she realized the front door had just locked from the outside. Through the window, she could see silhouettes, long, unnatural shapes with sunken eyes, slowly gathering around her car, waiting patiently in the dark. In the unforgiving Appalachian frost of West Virginia, Dr. Eris Thorne parked his sedan near the abandoned coal shafts of Matewan. His GPS had inexplicably routed him into a pitch-black hollow where the cellular signal vanished, and the autumn temperature plummeted below freezing. He stepped out into the biting chill, hoping to find the nearest interstate to reach his hotel in Charleston. Instead, he found the whispering forest. The trees seemed to lean closer, their bare branches scraping against the overcast night sky like skeletal fingers. Eris pulled his coat tight and trudged toward a flickering light piercing through the dense, creeping fog. As he drew closer, the source of the glow resolved itself into an antique oil lamp sitting perfectly balanced on the hood of a rusted, 1970s-era pickup truck. There was no driver. He called out into the dead air, his breath materializing as gray mist against the dark trees. The only response was a faint, discordant hum emanating from the back of the truck. Eris approached the tailgate, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Resting on the truck bed were dozens of tattered, mud-stained paper dolls, each bearing his exact date of birth written in dark crimson ink. Before he could process the impossible sight, the truck's engine sputtered to a violent life. The headlights glared into his eyes, blinding him. He turned to run, but the forest path he had just walked down was gone, replaced by a solid wall of towering, unbroken pines. A voice, raspy and sounding exactly like his own, whispered from directly behind him in the dark. "Welcome home, Eris." The headlights died, plunging the hollow into an absolute, suffocating blackness. In the silence that followed, a loud, heavy thud sounded from the driver's side door, and the metallic click of the ignition key turning in the dark echoed through the trees.
ডেন্টিস্টের পরামর্শ নাও নতুন কোলগেট অ্যাক্টিভ সল্ট।
The old wooden clock in the hallway stopped ticking at exactly 3:15 a.m., plunging the house into a suffocating, heavy silence. Arthur woke up to a scratching sound beneath his bed, rhythmic and deliberate, like long fingernails dragging against the floorboards. He held his breath. A whisper slithered from the dark corner of his bedroom, calling his name in a voice that sounded like dry leaves scraping over concrete. It was the exact voice of his wife, Clara, who had passed away in that very room 3 weeks ago. His heart hammered wildly against his ribs. Slowly, Arthur turned his head toward the window, praying for the safety of the coming dawn. Moonlight cut through the blinds and cast a pale glow across the empty floor. Clara was standing beside the dresser, her back turned to him, wearing the white dress she was buried in, her head twisted backward in a sickening, unnatural arc of bone and tendon until her hollow, black eyes locked directly onto his. A wide, jagged grin split her pale face, stretching from ear to ear in a silent scream. The scratching under the bed stopped, replaced by the sound of bare feet stepping onto the rug. Arthur tried to scream, but his throat felt choked with ash and dust as cold fingers wrapped tightly around his ankles. My paranormal experience. This story is from the year 2015 when I was 9. My entire family was on a vacation trip to Puri. We stayed in a hotel which is one of our family members. We were on a vacation. We all were playing games like Truth and Dare, so my elder cousins were teasing me, "Look out from the balcony, you will find someone standing in a white sari," and I was like, this is all rubbish. Deep down I was scared as hell. As the hotel belonged to our uncle, an elder cousin started telling stories at 3 a.m., that in one of the rooms, a German family died by suicide. We all laughed in response because, who will come back from Germany and attempt suicide here? So he was like, it's up to you whether you will agree with me or not. This conversation kept on going, and between this, someone knocked at our door. At first, we thought it might be one of our uncles because we all were awake, so he must have been there to say, "Sleep, we have to leave early morning tomorrow." We all stopped laughing and pretended as if we were sleeping. So in the meantime, someone knocked on the door again, and when he opened the door there was no one, there was not a single person, and it was a pin-drop silence. We all were so freaking scared. So after that incident, we all slept, and I don't know why, but while sleeping I felt like someone was singing beside me in some unknown language. I shared this with my sister, and she told me that she heard the same kind of thing when I informed our family. One said a single thing later on when we were back home, and my uncle informed me that the room we were in was the room the German family had died.